Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumois, Perek Vav, Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Nun Zayin. We left off on Daf Nun Vav Amid Base, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid Tanei. We're going to start today's Daf learning about the rule in the Mishnah that the Keren v'Choimish, that one has to pay if one ate Truma b'Shoigeg, is the same whether one ate Truma Tohira or if someone ate Truma Tamei. That is what the Mishnah says. The question will be, now that we established that the payment has to come from Chulin, the question is, does it have to come from Chulin Tohirin, Dafke, or could it even come from Chulin Tameim, which then would mean that when you actually give it to the Kohen, you're giving back to the Kohen Truma Tameya, which you can argue is okay, because at the end of the day, you ate Truma Tameya, so you're giving back exactly what you took. Or not, or you give back Truma Tohira, which means that the Chulin that you designate has to be Tohirin. That's going to be the first topic. The next topic is going to be some greater clarification regarding the law that Tashlumei Truma, we'll call it Tashlumei Truma, which refers both to the Keren and to the Chaimish, right? The repayment of the Truma. That Tashlumei Truma is like Truma, the question will be from when? Because there's always these two steps when it comes to any Truma. There is the person's designating / separating the Truma. When I say designating, I mean orally, which is enough. Separating is just physically separating the Truma. But then there is the next step, which is the giving it, the Nesina LaKoyin. Vadai, when you give it to the Kohen, the Keren and the Chaimish, the Tashlumei Truma will be Banafai Truma. Question is, what does the separating do to the Chulin? Does it already imbue it with full-fledged Truma sanctity? There's a machlokes about that. Or is there some sanctity, and we'll see how that expresses itself, but it's not full Truma sanctity, and we'll see how that part expresses itself. That will be a big part of today's daf. And at the end of today's daf, we're going to have the following discussion. If a non-Kohen stole Truma from a Kohen, and prior to eating it, the Kohen was Moichel de Geneva, which then would mean that he now owns the Truma. He didn't know it's Truma, and he ate it. He ate it b'shoigig. The question will be, what type of chiyuv does he have right now? Vadai, he has to separate chulin, misukanim, for tashlumei truma, because as we learned in the Mishnah, the kohen is not able to forgive the tashlumei truma, because it's not only financial restitution, even the keren has a component of kapara. But maybe for that, it's enough for one to designate it as truma for tashlumin. And then the question is, must he gift it to a kohen? Or since when he ate it, it belonged to him, will he be allowed to, he's not a kohen, will he be allowed to sell it to a kohen? Now, this is the Gemara's question. The Gemara is going to bring a machlokes between a Shlakish and Rabbi Yochanan and correlate it to a very similar case, and that is, as we mentioned a few times, it's possible for a Yisrael to own Truma. If a Kohen has a daughter, and the daughter marries a Yisrael, and they have children, right? So now the Zayda has Truma. Let's say the Zayda passes away, the daughter Yarshant, the daughter passes away, her son Yarshants, a Yisrael. So Rabbi Yochanan and Ishlakish are speaking about a scenario where a person, Gabakok, he steals from a Zayda. That means a Yisrael stole Truma, but prior to him eating it, B'shoigeg, the Zayda passed away, the mother passed away, he now owns the Truma. Same similar concept. The Gemara's Kasha is by Geneva. Here, and then there was Mechila, here there was a Yerusha, and there indeed we'll see that Rabbi Yochanan holds that in order for the Ganef to get kapara, he must not only replace the Truma, he must give it to another Kohen. And Shlakish says no. The Shlakish says that if Bishas Achila, the Achilas HaTruma is that which triggers the obligation of Tashlumin, Keren v'Chaimish. If at that time he owned it, yes, he has to designate Chulin, and it will be imbued with Kedushas Truma, Keren v'chaimish, Eloma, he'll be able to sell it to another kohen. He's not chayiv to gift it to a kohen. That's going to be the whole daf today. And again, we're dedicating today's daf, l'refuah shlema, to Levi Halevi ben Leah, and Chevra daf nun vav amid beis. I can say compared to last week, it's much easier, and it's very pashut, very geshmak. Geshmak is sugis. So first of all, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid, Tani we learned in a Braisa. And this is in addition to what we learned in the Mishnah. Again, the Mishnah says that the chiyuv of the Torah, the ishki yoichal kodesh bishgaga, right? So the Torah says that he has to separate the keren, the chamishisoi olav, and he has to give it to a kohen, is whether the truma that he ate b'shogeg was tohira, even if he ate truma temeya. Now says the Braisa, achal truma temeya. Really, what must happen as a lechatchila, mishalem chulin tohirin, he has to separate chulin tohirin. He cannot say, this person, listen, what I did was b'shoigig, I'm going to follow through with the penalty. I ate truma temeya. I have to give keren v'chaimish. I'll give it back also temeya. How will I do it? I'll do it by separating chulin temeyim for my tashlumin, and then it's going to be imbued with kedushas truma. That is something vada you should not do lechatchila, because chavra, we don't want for truma to be tamei. Question is, what happens if you did it? But the im shilem chulem temeim, the Tanakam of this brayso holds, yes, yotza, you fulfilled your obligation. Now look inside the Rashirilyo. On the left column, mishalem chulem tohirim, 6 lines before the bottom of the Amid, the ha'oichel truma shoygeg ein mishalem ma'ois alapedes. V'heinas and truma. In other words, the reason why lechatchila everyone holds you have to separate chulin tohirim, like we explained, because I am not supposed to have any truma that's tamei. We're supposed to guard truma from tuma. Well, since I know that the chulin that I am separating for tashlumin will become imbued with kedushas truma, so lechatchila it has to be chulin. But ve'im shilam chulin temeim, and the Tanakama holds bein b'shoygeg shelo yehoyo yodeya that the chulin is temeim, or even if he separated chulin b'mezid, chulin temeim b'mezid, bein shoyu yidei Hashem temeim. Nevertheless, the Tanakama holds tashluma of tashlumin, and it becomes truma temeya, and now it belongs to the kohen. Yeah, I know the kohen has very little he can do with it, but that's life. However, the Rashirilya wants us to know that in Talmud Bavli there's another layer that's not mentioned here, and that is ubi Gemara Dilan, in our Gemara, that means Talmud Bavli, Perek HaNezikin, Gittin Daf Nun Dalet. Tane, we also learned the Chayzer u'mishalem chulem tohoirin mishum knas, that if someone did it, now it's not clear to me, learning just from the Rashirilya, is the knas only if someone did it b'mezit, which would make sense? Is the knas even b'shoigeg? Could be, I don't know, but he just wants you to know that it's not so pashit, that in the Bavli, you have to give again a payment, but the new payment, the second payment, is not truma. Whether the second payment has to be keren v'choimish or only keren, I don't know. He doesn't write it, and none of this is mentioned here in the Yerushalmi. Bottom line is, the Tanakama holds that b'diavad, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, you can pay back with chulin temeim, which will become truma temeya. However, Rabbi Nasan Amar, and he quotes das yachid sumches, that sumches soimer. Only by shoygeg do we say b'diavad masha asu yasui. In other words, his payment, he fulfilled his obligation of the tashlumei truma keren v'choimish. But if what he separated in chulin began as already chulin temeim, and he knew that, then lo yasa klum, which means that which he separated was not imbued with any kedusha. And if he gave it to the kohen, he'll get it back from the kohen. It's nothing. It didn't work. He has to now separate new chulin tohirin, keren v'choimish, and that will be his both kapara and his repayment for the fact that he was oichel truma b'shoigeg. Okay, so that's clear. Machlokes tanoim, but you have, let's call the chachamim versus sumchas. Now, daf nun zayin chevra. Let's go to today's daf. Tamon Tanina, the Gemara is going to correlate this machlokes to a similar machlokes that we had towards the beginning of the Masechta. We mentioned this halacha various times already, and that is this side of the halacha is easier to understand. We learned in a Mishnah, in our pagination, it's daf tezayin. Ein toirimin min hatame al hator, right? No, I have 2 piles of produce tevel, right? Aviv, simple dinim, when it was simple in the beginning. And then the Gemara, this is typical Yerushalmi, the Iker Chaser min HaSefer, because they expect you to remember. The Mishnah says, and if someone was min hamukav, they did everything right, but they separated min hatame al hator, then the Mishnah says it depends. B'shoigeg, what you did is valid. B'mezid is not valid. That's what we had in the Mishnah. But then the Gemara quoted the Braisa, and nevertheless, Tani b'shem Rabbi Yosi, that im Torah min hatame al hator. It's interesting that there, the Das Yachid, that Mishnah, let's say the Chachamim, Stam Mishnah, even though it could be Rav Meir, but it's the consensus holds that we don't differentiate between Shoigeg, we differentiate. Shoigeg, it's valid, Mezid, it's not valid. Rabbi Yosi is the one that holds Bein b'Shoigeg, Bein b'Mezid, Mashu Asu Asu. So first of all, the Gemara says that this is very similar to here. That's first of all. And we're not refuting that similarity. The only thing we're pointing out is that it would be even better if it would be a Das Yachid, like a Das Yachid, Das Rabbim, like Das Rabbim. Turns out that by Yos, right, Sumchus is the Das Yachid, he's the one that differentiates between Shoyeg and Mezid. So the Das Yachid in ours is like the Das Rabbim and Daf Tezayin. The Das Yachid of Daf Tezayin Rabbi Yosi, Das Yachid, follows the Rabbim, Bein b'Shoigeg, Bein b'Mezid. The first opinion brought down on the Braisa. That's what the Gemara says in the next line. It chaps that the Yichidah, the Hache, Kistama, the Taman, and the Yichidah, the Taman, Kistama, the Hache. So that is the anomaly. But the comparison is correct. The comparison is correct. Obviously, it's not exactly correct, but I think that's what the Gemara means, because if it would have been mamish the same, then it would have been, at least the Chachamim and the Chachamim would have said the same thing, but they don't. So it's similar, but not exactly the same. I think that's what the Gemara really means to say. Okay. Now, moving on. When the Mishnah says that, our Mishnah, Perek Shishi, that you have to designate, separate chulin misukanim completely for the tashlumei truma keren v'chaimish. So number one, because I cannot separate truma, like we said in the Mishnah, because I cannot pay a debt. When I owe you money, I have to pay you my debt from my money. I cannot pay you back your debt from your money. I'm chayiv to pay. And we said it's not only about repayment, there's also by the keren a component of kapara. We'll see more details about this soon. So I separate chulin misukanim, and it's imbued with kedusha. And again, the big thing today will be is at what point, when you separate it or when you give it. Vadai something when you separate. Question is complete.
What?
Does it become truma? Okay. So the hein nasin truma, and therefore the hatashlumin is truma. Okay. Now says the Gemara, eich avida. Eich avida literally means how do you do it? What the Yerushalmi means here, eich avida, when you separate it, is it fully truma? Or when you separate it, is it only from some perspective truma, but not fully truma? For it to become fully truma, you have to actually give it to the kohen. We're going to see on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Beis today, it's a machloikes tanoim. For some reason, the Masader of the Yerushalmi doesn't begin it's a braisa. That's a machloikes tanoim. We're going to begin with a shita that follows one of the two, as we'll see. So says the Gemara, Rab Ze'era, in the name of Rab Chanina, he says like this: when you separate the truma, tashlumei truma harein ketruma l'chol davar. Elo. One second. I take back what I said, guys. I got ahead of myself. The topic that I spoke about is going to be here in a moment. Here, we're going even more. When you give it to the kohen, it's truma. The Gemara is saying maybe it's not mamish truma, even after you give it to the kohen. And that's what we quoted Rab Ze'era b'shem Rab Chanina, that tashlumei truma, when you give it to the kohen, when you separate it and then give it to a kohen, it is ketruma l'chol davar ella. There is an ella. There is a little wrinkle, which is the rule that giduleim are chulin. Now, let me tell you like this. We're going to have this later, that Ashadilio quotes and Pedic. I'm trying to see over here in what Pedic we have this later. Yeah, Pedic has a Pedic test. We're going to have the following rule, guys. When a person plants truma. Now, I know that some unique plants, when you put them in the ground, they don't completely decompose. That's the anomaly. That's the exception. The rule is, the norm is that when you put a seed in the ground, the seed completely decomposes. Zaroi kolo. And then, as we learn in Chassidus, actually, that the new product doesn't even come from the seed. It comes from the koyach and from the ground. The seed is only the trigger. However it works. Al pi emes, which also means al bigashmis. The Chachamim said that if one second, and therefore, Aviv, if I put a seed in the ground, I have an apple, it's truma. What happens when I plant this apple seed is that a seed completely decomposes. It becomes nothing. So really, you would argue, and I just said, and the new apple tree comes from the earth. The earth is not truma. By Torah law, gidulim of truma should be chulin. Really, tevel goes back to nothing. It goes back to zero. The Chachamim were misakin. It's a rabbinic rule that gedulei truma have a status of truma. The Chachamim did not make gezeres on things that are unusual. For someone to eat truma b'shoigig, that's unusual. For them to pay back, and for the person who got it to plant it, that's mamash davar shelo shchiach. So this rule that gedulei truma has a status of truma does not apply on tashlumei truma. In other words, tashlumei truma is truma l'chol davar, but there is a but. There is a however. It's not mamish. Where does it express itself? Really, it's truma. If gedulei truma would be like truma midoiraisa, then it would be the same. Since gedulei truma is only a law midrabana, look inside the last line of the Rashi, the right column. Hache begedulei tashlumin, it's loigazer. The musa the leishchicha he loigazer baraban. Imagine if someone to go ahead and to plant the tashlum, the whole thing is not something that's shchiach. So that's one. However. So there's a little wrinkle in the din that tashlumei truma is ketruma. Another din, nachazach, gedulei truma. What we said, it's the rabbanan. Let me ask you a question. If a person goes ahead and when it comes to gedulei truma means something that grew from the seed of truma, the aftergrowths of truma. What happens if a person eats that b'shoigig? Are they going to be chayv keren v'choimish? Very good. So it's not. So therefore, it goes both ways. So gedulei truma. So first of all, tashlumei truma is truma l'chol davar, but the geduleim is not truma. Very good. So therefore, gedulei truma, it's really not truma. It's asur lizarim. The din that the Chachamim said that it's like truma basically means is that a non-kohen is not allowed to eat it. But it's not truma. Because if a non-kohen were to eat it, he won't be chayv to give keren v'choimish. He'll be chayv to give compensation, but he won't be chayv to give keren v'choimish. Beautiful. Gedulei truma harein kachulon l'chol davar. Ela shasurim l'zarim, the way it's worded. Okay, now, Amar Rabbi Yosi, both of these statements of Rabbi Zeira, that tashlumei truma is like truma, but there's an exception. The second statement that gedulei truma is essentially not truma. That's the way we called it that midrabanan. But the way he's wording it is not that it's truma midrabanan. He's saying gedulei truma. The Chachamim said asurim lezarim. Basically, both of that could be learned from Mishnayos. So let's go. We know both of them just from the Mishnah. We didn't even, almost like we didn't need him. Or if someone really knows how to learn, he wouldn't need the statement of Rabbi Zeira. Number one, tashlumei truma harei truma l'chol davar. Right? How do we know that? Ditaninan, as we learned in our Mishnah, that einoi mishalem truma ella chulin misukanen, vehein nasin truma. So that's clear. The Mishnah says these words. Elo. The next thing that he said is Shegeduleim chulin, that gedulei of tashlumei truma, they themselves are mamash chulin. They're chulin. How do we know that? From another Mishnah that we're going to have on Daf Peches, where the Mishnah says gedulei truma is truma. Is a raya that gidulei tashlumein will be chulin, like the Pnei Moshe says that the Mishnah always writes the greatest chiddush. From it, you automatically know the lesser chiddush. The first line under the Gemara, the Eloi and the Pnei Moshe, the Eloi teimahachem. If you were to understand that the Mishnah on Daf Peches that teaches us the dinim of gedulim would hold that even gidulei tashlumin is truma. The Eloi teimahachem lishmein and avusatzvei. The Mishnah should have said velisnei gedulei truma v'tashlum meha truma. We should have said it explicitly. Not from it you would have known both. The fact the Mishnah doesn't mention it is a raya. So all of this is a proof to the first statement of Rabbi Zajac, that Tashlumei Truma is Ketruma, Elomad, it's Gedulim, is Kechulin. The second statement that he made was that regarding the sugya that we'll have later in Daf and Peidik Tes, and Daf Peches, that Gedulei Truma, the Mishnah says, the Chachamim said it's Truma, says Rabbi Zajac, doesn't mean it's Truma. Really, it's Kechulin. Really, it is Kechulin. How do we know that? Also from the Mishnah. And it's very simple, because we're going to learn later, actually, this is on Daf Pehei, a bit earlier, that regarding Gedulei Truma. Now, Aviv, let's go back to way back when. I want you to know that anything that's imbued with Kedushas Truma is exempt from Leket Shikhan Peah. The fact that the Mishnah writes that if someone took product that's Truma and he took its seeds and he planted it and now there's a new crop, Gedulei Truma, the Mishnah says Chayeves Beleket Shikhan Peah. So clearly, is a raya that it's not, even on a rabbinic level, it's not pshat that Rabbanan said that it becomes truma. It doesn't become truma. It's a precaution, making sure people don't go ahead and plant truma by telling you you're not going to benefit anything. You're not going to benefit because what's going to grow is going to be asur lezarim, and therefore eat it. And the Chachamim made various gezedas wanting people to eat their truma ASAP for one fear, that if a person is going to store their truma, a non-kohen accidentally might eat it. That was it. And why would people store normally? Either you eat it or you plant it. So they says you're not going to benefit by planting it. And another din, va'aniya Yisrael, va'aniya kohanim, they both can be malakit. In other words, the fact that aniya kohanim can be malakit is nishkanaya. The fact that aniya Yisrael, it knows Aniya Yisrael are entitled. Aniya Yisrael may not eat truma. That's why they leket shikhopeya. Elama, after they collected whatever that is, and now everything else is asurim lezarim, and that's clearly the Taninan, as we learned. That Aniya Yisrael cannot eat it. Aniya Yisrael moichlin meshulahem lekanim admei truma v'adamim shalohem. In other words, Gedulei Truma, it may not be eaten. Because if it may be eaten, Danny, why would they have to sell it? They should be able to eat it. So it's amazing. So even the Leket Shikhopeah that Aniya Yisrael collected, they're not allowed to eat it. But they're allowed to sell it. Now, why is it even theirs? If Gedulei Truma is Pshat Truma, then there would be no Leket Shikhopeah, period. So here clearly you see that when the Chachamim, we're going to learn about this later, when they made a takana that Gedulei Truma is Ketruma, what they really meant is Gedulei Truma may not be eaten by Zarim. That's what they meant. But if a Zar ate it, he won't be chayv to pay Keren V'chaimish because he didn't really eat Truma. Okay, end. Now, says the Gemara, Tani, we learned in a Braisa. This is going back to what I said before. I just got ahead of myself. Tashlumei Truma. The tashlumim of truma, ein mishalmin mehen keren v'choimish. Wawawi. We're speaking about using it to pay for another eating of truma. That's the whole pshat. In other words, that's the first thing the Braisa is telling you. That once you designated truma, once you designated chulin to be tashlumei truma, then it's no longer chulin. And therefore you cannot use You cannot kill two birds with one stone. On the other hand, ve'ein mishalmin aleim keren v'choimish. Here clearly you see the Mishnah said otherwise, right? The Mishnah said otherwise. It's not contradicting the Mishnah. According to this Tana, as we'll see on Amud Beis, this Tana holds that there are two stages. There's the designation of chulin to be tashlumin, and yes, it's imbued somewhat with kedusha, which is why you can't use. The other hand, when does it become full-fledged truma? Only when you give it to the kohen. After that, if a zar eats it, he'll be chayv to pay for that. He ate tashlumin keren v'choimish. But prior to it being given to a kohen, it's not mamish truma, and therefore, if now a zar eats it, the ein mishalman keren v'choimish. Another very important rule: whenever we learn that you don't pay keren v'choimish, you know what you'll always have to pay? Keren, but that will be something else. We just began the Rambam yesterday because I gamvit, I was mazik, I took your property. Another din, the ein chayavin b'chala. If someone made dough from the tashlumin prior to giving it to the kohen, if it would have if it would be chulin, then you would be chayv and chala. So the Braisa is going back. It's like going back and forth. That on one hand, it's not full. On the other hand, it's already truma. So you can't pay, you can't use it as another keren v'choimish. You can't use it for another act of eating. You are not chayiv and chala. Why not? Because we view it as truma, enough for it not to be chayiv and chala. But on the other hand, what happens if there is a tuma on the level of a sheni? Sheni, exempting shitas Rabbi Akiva that we had over there in Pesachim, Rabbi Chanina Skanar Kehanim, and we don't paskin like him. Chulin can only become tamei the most on the level of a sheni. What could become tamei, or we say the word pasul, even on the level of a shlishi? Truma. And therefore, someone who did not wash their hands, tumas yodayim, which is rabbinic, is that our hands are tamei only on the level of a sheni. Otful yom, we just learned recently, someone who went to the mikvah, but they need to wait until it gets dark. From after the mikvah until when it gets dark, they are only tamei on the level of a sheni, which means if they touch chulin, they will not be metamet. If they touch ma'aser sheni, they will not be metamet. Only if they touch truma. What happens if such a person, either the Yodayim or Sheni, or the person is a Tful Yom, what were to happen if they touched this product that was separated but not yet given? If you were to hold that once you separate it as Truma, it's Mamish Truma, and that's why it's not Chayv, Mamish Truma, then if someone, the Yodayim Tameis, would touch it, it would make it puzzle. But we don't say that. The Ein HaYodayim, we have to know the girsa. Nor et full yoim will invalidate it. Kederech, you have to go with the girsa. She'ein pois lois bechulin. So in other words, the Braisa is going back and forth. On one hand, it's truma. On the other hand, it's not truma. Very good. And the final statement of this Braisa that will be elaborated in the next shtickle, v'uf Rab Shimon v'Rabbi Yosi, the last statement is true even according to Rab Shimon and Rabbi Yosi. Chavra, we're going to read the Pnei Moshe, the Maraf folder for some reason. Again, they're so learned. He says, over there in the Tosefta that we're going to have, Truma Ispedekei Halacha Tes, they're more machmir, but here they'll agree with it. What's the last statement? That they won't passel it, be a dime to mayors. He doesn't tell you what it is. The Pnei Moshe writes the whole thing. For Uf Rab Shimon v'Rabbi Yosi moide, but Rab Shimon v'Rabbi Yosi, we're going now, he quotes Mesechtas Tful Yoim, Pei Gimel, Mishnah Dalet. Over there we learned the following, that if you have a dough that became meduma, or if you have a dough that was, the ratio was more than 100 to 1, it's not batal because the sourdough, the starter was truma. Whichever one it is. So it's meduma. So the Braisa says, Eina nifselas b'tful yom. In other words, even though meduma means a non-kohen can't eat it, but it's not full truma, it doesn't become possible. It doesn't become a shlishi. However, Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Shimon say it does. That's the Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Shimon that will be moide here that it will not. Now he'll explain why. The Tanakama Sfira Lohem or Sfira Lei depends if it's Yachad or Rabim. The Afal Gav the Asura Lizarim Bikal Makim Leingin Psul Tuma Hoilchim achar iker ha'isa, and the iker ha'isa is chulani. These are very important things to know on the side. How to view meduma. We still view it that the main thing is chulin. However, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Sfira lahem, the hoil vasura lezarim, the zar cannot eat it. So therefore, nefselis b'tful yaim. So you would think that they would say same thing over here. Even according to the Tana that we learned on Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph, that after the separating, before giving it, it's already truma. It's already truma. I cannot use it to make another repayment, right? It's not chayiv and chala. That means it has a status of somewhat truma. So you would think, even though it's not full-fledged, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon will hold, like by the meduma, that it could acquire truma on the level of a shlishi. No, they don't. What's the difference? Because in the cases over there, truma fell into this dough. The sourdough, the starter was truma. There is some. Is it the iker? No, but it's there. But over here, the iker hatashlumin chulin hein. That's the way he words it. It began with chulin. Didn't come from truma. It had to come from chulin. And until you give it to the kohen, our Tana holds it's not full-fledged truma yet. So there is no full-fledged truma. None of it. So therefore, hey moedim the afal gav dasurim lizarim. Nevertheless, ein nifsalim bitful yoim. Great. Now we're moving on. The Mishnah says that im rotza hakoyin limchoil eino moichel. Now the Gemara is going to have a very important qualification to that. Now that we said, my friends, that once I separate the truma, even the Tana that we learned on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, when I separate the chulin, it somewhat becomes invested with Kedushas Truma. So even if it's not fully, so says the Gemara, you know when the kohen cannot be moichel? Only if you didn't even separate your chulin misukarim. B'shaloi hifrish. Why can't the kohen be moichel? I'm asking a simple question, Aviv. If I owe you money, can you forgive me the debt? Of course you could. So let's say you're a kohen and I ate up your truma, and you're saying you forgive me. Why does it not work? Because aside of the financial part, I sinned. So there has to be a consequence for me. You know when I have a consequence? When I had chulin, and now I separate it. Now that I separated it, even if it's not fully truma, it's truma enough that I cannot eat it anymore. I cannot eat it. That's already a consequence. So the Gemara is saying that once the owner, the oichel b'shoigig, was mafresh the truma, that means he already now has the kapara of him having the keren v'choimish of his own. Now it's separated for truma. The kohen from whom I ate b'shoigig can tell me I forgive the debt. Now what would happen, Aviv? Now I would not be allowed to eat it. I would be able to sell it to any coin that I want. I would only get demei truma, which is a lot less than the demei chulin, but at least I don't have to. You understand? I get to sell it. That's a very important chap. In other words, if until me giving it to the coin, it would have no kedusha, there is no such an opinion, then this wouldn't work. Because the penalty part is that I ate someone else's truma. Hashem says, yeah, you ate into someone else's truma, I'm eating into your chulin, so to say. Some of your chulin, not only the same amount, that amount and a fifth is going to become holy. You have to make it into truma. Now that we said that even according to the opinions that hold that the separation in itself doesn't make it full-fledged, it makes it somewhat truma, that is my kapara. And afterwards, the coin can be moichel. Now, hifrish, let's go weiter. What happens if someone separated the produce? So he did that. And now, instead of him giving it to a kohen by accident, he ate it. We just learned on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, right? If it's not full-fledged truma, will I be chayv to pay for that? That's the question. So this is the plukta of a Rabbi and Ablaza ben Rab Shimon, the Tanei. When the pasuk writes, the pasuk that we began this Pedic with, the pasuk in Parshas Emor, that the ish ki yoichal kodesh bishgaga v'yasav chamishisoi olav. The next words of the pasuk is that v'nosan lakoyin es hakodesh. V'nosan lakoyin es hakodesh. So understands over here, Rabbi, that matanosoi mekatsoi, that only the giving it fully imbues it with kedusha. Not that until you give it there is no kedusha. That's clear not. But only when you give it is it fully imbued with kedusha's truma. And now the consequence will be is that after you gave it to the kohen, if now a zar ate it, they'll be chayiv to give a chaimish. And the Mishnah uses the words you're chayiv to give a chaimish even if you only ate a chaimish. The chaimish and the keren are equally truma. However, pirishasai, when you only separate it, whether it's verbally, whether it's physically, that does something, which is mekadashtoi miloichal bitruma. I'm not allowed to eat it. But if I ate it, I'm not going to be chayv keren v'chaimish. Very clear. These are the words of Rabbi, and now we know that the brisa that we learned on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph follows the sheet of Rabbi. Why am I saying that? Because according to Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon, he says, "Af hafrashosoi mikadashtoi l'chayiv olav keren v'chaimish." Aside of it being mikadosh it to the level that no non-kohen is allowed to eat it. According to this, Danny, if someone were to touch it, he'll make it tamei. It's mamish truma. Clear. Okay. My comment still stands. In other words, one can argue, first quote this machlokes, and then quote the rest. We don't do that way, for whatever reason. There's another reason for the save. Okay. So first of all, we established that. There's two ways of understanding the penalty, hafrasha matana, when it comes to general truma, just for the record, when it comes to general truma, Aviv, when does it become truma? When you're mafresh it, full-fledged truma. When I have tevel and I'm mafresh the 2%. When I have my sedition and I'm mafresh the exact 10%. That act, even if it's only verbal, that is that full truma, no question. The only question here is that since the same pasuk that tells you the same pasuk says v'nosan, so that's the source of Rabbi, that only when v'nosan does it become full-fledged truma. And he doesn't understand it that way. Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon says no, that they use only by tashlumin. That's very clear. Not very important. Full-fledged by your hafrasha. Correct. Okay. And now comes the following. What happens? We spoke this out in the intro. You have a kohen, and Aviv, you're a kohen, let's say. Now, I want to say like this, that when I eat by Geneva, there is no concept of shoygeg amazed. You have to understand that. Or by all financial obligations, right? If I'm driving down the street and by accident, most accidents are called in English an accident. If I banged into your car, I'm a shoygeg. Let's hope, right? I didn't do it deliberately. Has nothing to do with my financial obligation. Very important. When it comes to going against the will of God, there we say, you do it b'shoigeg, you did it b'mezit. By Geneva, there's no such a thing. Why am I saying that? If I went ahead and you're a kohen and I didn't eat it right away, first I stole it. When did I become a ganef? When I took it out of your house, or when I put it when I lifted it. If I did the meshicha, when I took it out of your reshus. If I did hagbah, when I picked it up in my hand, with the intent of taking it away. Forget about Shoyeg Amazing. When I did an act of Geneva, I took your truma to my house. And then I didn't know it's truma, and then I ate it. So in that case, everything is the same. I ate Aviv's truma b'shoigeg. I'm chayiv to give to you keren v'chaimish. Here the question is, I went ahead and I stole your truma. God forbid. I didn't know it's truma, but I stole your money. And for whatever reason, when you became aware that I stole your stuff, you forgave me. Then I ate it. Now, the halacha would be that if you forgive a geneva, it becomes the ownership of the ganef. Interesting question. Do I have to separate keren v'chaimish? Yeah, because we keep on saying that the separation of the keren and the chaimish isn't only for compensation. that I got. But after I separated, I designated my chulin misukanin in the value of the keren v'choimish as the tashlumei truma. Am I chayiv to give it to Aviv, or can I say that I got my kapara and I own it because I owned the truma before I ate it? And now what? Now I get to sell it, like we just said before. I get to sell it. Great. Mochal, if the non-kohen stole it before he ate it, he owned it. How did he own it? Because the owner who found out that someone took something, I'm saying that normally he would be moichel, because it was an act of shoygik. He found out someone took by accident. Been moichel. Or you have these great tzaddikim, you have all these stories. He saw someone stealing an article, he said, "Been moichel." You're taking it anyways. You might as well not get punished for it. Mochal v'chakach ochal. So what is the question again? That the ganef has to separate keren v'choimish if vadai, but must he gift it to a kohen or may he sell it to a kohen? If he has to gift it, he has to gift it. Now, even gifting it to whom? If he has to gift it, it can also be to any kohen, because the owner is no longer the owner. But at least he has to gift it. Or no, since he ate his own, he taka has to separate keren v'choimish, but he gets to sell it. So says the Gemara that this is the machloikes between Rabbi Yochanan and Eish Lakish, even though they argued in a case that's similar to a ganef that the owner was Michael. And what is their case? The Ispalgun Gazal Truma Mishalavi Imoy Kohen. A Yisrael has a Zayda that's a Kohen. His mother's father is a Kohen. And this Einokol went ahead and he ganvid his stuff. Didn't know it's Truma. Or he knew and he forgot, or he didn't know he can't eat Truma. Forget about the Shogeg on Truma. He ganvid from the Zayda. Before he ate that which he stole, the Zayda passed away. But oifen that he was the Yoidish. It can even be that his mother passed away before. So now that the Zayda passed away, went to him. However it works in Dinei Yerusha, look at the end of Masechtas Bava Bas. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar, that even though, now to whom is he going to pay? One thing is clear. Even if you have to gift it, to whom? It was his. Doesn't matter. That mishalim l'shevet. In other words, not only does he have to separate keren v'choimish, but he has to gift it to whom? To a kohen, to the tribe. You get to pick to whom, but you have to give. Notes. Your full kapara is not only did you designate, therefore losing your chulin, because now it became truma. And the keren v'choimish now of your chulin misukana became truma. You have to give it. Reishlakish Amar, no, mishalim la'atzmai. You designate it. That for sure you have to designate lekapara for the fact that you ate truma b'shoigig. But since it was yours, so then you get to keep it. Now you can't eat it. Fine, so you sell it. However much money you can get. Beautiful. So Chaver, I think we'll stop over here. Those cases are very, very similar. They're not exactly the same, but they're same in concept. That by the time the person ate truma b'shoigig, the truma then belonged to him. Whether it belonged to him because there was an act of mechila of the owner, whether it belonged to him because he yashaned it, it's the same in that sense. And what becomes clear, this is great, what becomes clear is that the separating in itself is a very insignificant part. And that is what transforms the chulin, even according to the first Tana, right, to Rebbe. Even according to Rebbe, it's a kapara. Because it's already not it's not chulin. That is the kapara.
Rabbi, at what point does he get full kapara?
According to the Shlakish, by his designations.
By his
designation. The fact that afterwards he has to give it to the coin from whom he stole it, that's because there's a din of compensation. When there was no mechila. And that's why the Mishnah said, in any case, even there, he only has to give the keren to the owner of the truma. The Mishnah said, our Mishnah says, the choimish he can give to whoever he wants. Great. No, it's the kapara part is by the designation. Even if the designation doesn't fully imbue it, it doesn't matter. It's no longer chulin. That's my kapara. Now I got a financial issue. I got truma. And by the way, I have to give it. If I ate it, I have to give it. I have to give keren to the owner. Chomish I get to give to whoever I want. Here the issue is that when I ate it, it belonged to me. It's amazing that Rabbi Yechanan holds that nevertheless the kapara, that's the answer to your question. Rabbi Yechanan holds that my kapara is when I give it away. I lost it. I ate up yours. I ate up $100. Hashem says my kapara is that now from me, $125 will be taken from me. Back to the tribe of the Kohana.
Listen, when you give it away, you get kapara and peace.
According full kapara, according to Rabbi Yechanan. According to the Shlakish, you get your kapara when you designate it.